Matt Atkinson will present 1863, the Siege of Vicksburg. Matt is from Houston, Mississippi. Grierson's raid came through his town. He attended Ole Miss and is currently pursuing a master's in history at the University of Louisiana, Monroe. His thesis is on the Battle of Chickasaw Bayou. Matt grew up in Mississippi, loving the Civil War. His parents took him to local battlefields such as Vicksburg and Shiloh, where he always asked, "Dad, did we win here?" His father always replied, "No, not here." Matt now works for Gettysburg National Military Park. He resides in Gettysburg with his wife Angela and their 5-year-old son Benjamin Lee. He is the author of Lieutenant Drennan's Letter, an edited and annotated version of a manuscript written by Confederate Staff Officer William Drennan, who witnessed many important events during the campaign and Siege of Vicksburg. Today he'll be talking about 1863, the Siege of Vicksburg, exploring the May 19 and May 22 assaults and siege warfare from May 23 to July 4. Please welcome Mr. Matt Atkinson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. You know somebody that's actually a big Elvis fan is Ted Alexander. And he knows a lot about that era of rock and roll. If you ever get a chance, talk to him about it. You know, it's pretty cool. Okay, so I have to say, starting off, that when I came up on stage, I had these people coming up, and it's always good to see familiar faces and so forth. And I was getting to see pictures of Van Horn Ellis and all that and Gettysburg, and I'd never seen a lot of those shots. So this attractive lady comes up to me right before the program. She goes, and I'm thinking this is going to be like a profound question. You know, I'm thinking, man, this is my day right here. So the first thing she does is look at me and ask, "Do you think Troy is still going to talk at 4:30? Okay. So much for conversation. There. Okay, I would like to say, though, in all seriousness, I wish I was not here. The reason I'm here today, ladies and gentlemen, is because our dear colleague and supervisor, Clyde Bell, passed away, and unexpectedly. A little over a week ago, and his good friend Jim Murray, of course, is on your schedule, and she could not make it. So that is why I'm filling in here today, which I'd wish it was under better auspices. Okay, so what we're going to do right now, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to talk about the Siege of Vicksburg. And there's 3 parts that I've done to this talk right here, and this is the third and final part. But basically, each part, it stands upon itself. The Siege of Vicksburg we're going to focus on the last 47 days of the siege. And it's kind of interesting because it happened simultaneous to the Gettysburg campaign, but it's a completely different mode of warfare than obviously the Wheatfield or Pickett's Charge or anything else. It's siege warfare, which is, in its own vein, pretty cool. Now, Vicksburg, basic rehash, is a town of about 5,000 people. What most people don't realize, I've had one of my coworkers, one of the seasonals, one of the college kids came into my office today, and he came over to my desk and was shaking my hand, and he said, "I just wanted to tell you that I will never be a neo-Confederate. But I want you to know that walking Pickett's Charge on July 3rd gave me a new appreciation for the Confederate soldier." And we kind of got talking about why people fight and all that and so forth. Vicksburg is the second largest town in Mississippi, yet is one of only 2 towns in Mississippi that, 2 counties in Mississippi that votes against secession. They and Adams County, Mississippi, which is the one below there. Nevertheless, despite being a pro-Union, pro-United States county, hundreds of people from Vicksburg will be in Barksdale's charge. to show you how it's hard really to stereotype and fit people into a box. Now, before the war, Vicksburg is important because, ladies and gentlemen, Vicksburg, if you look on the screen, which is going to be in the back, it's going to be somewhat difficult. You'll see the Mississippi River goes down through the center of the map. And if you look, the largest letter along the Mississippi River, kind of a little bit lower than the center, is Memphis, Tennessee. Vicksburg is 4 black dots beneath that. In a nutshell, it is a river port that also has a railroad. And because of the railroad and the river port, for this reason, Vicksburg is going to thrive, both as a commercial center and, of course, as an economic center also, up through here. Now, in peacetime, I love this shot, Vicksburg flourished for both these factors right here. Now, the basic goal of the Union Army, and you'll hear, if you want to study the Vicksburg campaign, you might as well get used to this, because you'll hear this repeated often. Once again, sort of hard, but if you look on the left side of the map, you may be able to make out the word Madison, which is written in large letters on the Louisiana side of the river, the left side of the river right there. Basically, Vicksburg is in small letters to the right of that big word Madison right there. The basic goal of Union forces, ladies and gentlemen, is how to get to Vicksburg. What most people fail to realize is that Vicksburg not only has the Mississippi River to the west, but it also has the Big Black River to the east and to the south, and it has the Yazoo River to the north. So you could say that Vicksburg is surrounded on all 4 areas, all 4 sides by river. So that's a problem. And we don't think like this, because this is like what Army commanders would think like. When you put an army ashore is one thing. Supplying it, though, is the major problem. You have to have high and dry ground in order to land an army and resupply it in any operation. And that proves very difficult to do at Vicksburg, right here. So, the 2 men that are going to make it happen are these gentlemen on the screen right now. This is Ulysses S. Grant on the left and David Dixon Porter on the right. Colorized pictures, of course. I doubt Troy will have colorized pictures out here today. Now, the one thing that ends up happening is you have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, that there is no MacArthur, there is no Eisenhower at Vicksburg. There is no 5-star commander in these theaters of operation. What do I mean? General Grant is independent. Admiral Porter is independent. That means they can do what they want. But the 2 men form a bond and a friendship where they trust each other. And you talk about the levels of the Vicksburg campaign, those are one of the things that is very hard to put a price on, is cooperation among the different branches. Now, the Union first attempts to get at Vicksburg involved Grant's Canal, Chickasaw Bluffs or Chickasaw Bayou, the Yazoo Pass expedition, the Steele's Bayou expedition, etc. The campaign also featured, the final campaign to get Vicksburg also featured 5 battles in roughly 3 weeks to take the city. I'll rehash that in just a minute. What we're going to do today, once again, is go over siege operations. But first, the Union commanders. You look at these 3 gentlemen right here. Just like the Union Army at Gettysburg, the Union Army at Vicksburg is going to be divided into 3 parts. Here at Gettysburg, they're in 7 parts. The gentleman on the left is John A. McClernand, political general from Illinois, who is one of Lincoln's favorites. The middle man is James McPherson, not to be mistaken for the author out here. He is approximately 30 years of age, right here. On the right, William T. Sherman. His name is still such an anathema today, none of you could utter it. But I will do it for you out here. 3 corps commanders, though. And this is the interesting thing, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about Grant, and let's talk about his plan. Grant comes up with a bold plan to march his army down the south side of Louisiana and then ford the Mississippi River further south from Vicksburg. William T. Sherman on the right writes Grant and says, "Hey, boss, don't do this. This is crazy. Don't do it." Sherman doesn't believe in the plan. The middle guy, James McPherson, has gone from a captain to a major general in a year. And I'm not joking. He doesn't have any experience up here. The last gentleman on the left, John A. McClernand, has actually gone behind Grant's back and literally gone to Abraham Lincoln personally and lobbied for his own personal command within Grant's department. That's a picture of him at Antietam with Lincoln, and he is lobbying him for that position. Well, Lincoln gives it to him. Unbeknownst to McClernand, though, he goes back and raises tens of thousands of men in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, ships them south to Memphis, and Grant and Sherman hijack his army before he can get there, literally, and take it down the river. And Sherman, that's what Sherman fights the Battle of Chickasaw Bayou with, McClernand's men. McClernand gets down there and he thinks he's got an independent army. Well, Lincoln pulls the rug out from under him. And he then becomes, instead of an independent army commander, he becomes a corps commander. Let me put it another way to you. McClernand wants he wants to be president. McClernand wants Grant's job. That's nothing new to you people in some workplaces, right? He wants my job. Right over here. Okay? Nothing changes. McClernand, though, ladies and gentlemen, out of all 3 corps commanders which I put forth to you, ladies and gentlemen, McClernand is the one that Grant has to rely upon to lead the vanguard of his advance. He is the man that, ironically, who endorses the plan. Now, Grant has 2 options. Going back to this map right here. I'm studying whether I want to leave this place or not and go to the TV. Grant has 2 options. He could return to Memphis, which is at the top side of the map, really off the map, several hundred miles, and he could campaign down through the state of Mississippi, rebuilding the railroad as he went. Or, as Grant feared, if he retreated, then this would be seen as a setback by the northern people. The other option was to trek down the western side or to the left side of the Mississippi River with his army right there. Grant chose the latter. He would march down the west bank of the Mississippi, and in order to cross to the eastern side, he needed the Navy. Only 2 weeks after the near miss at Steele's Bayou, Grant turned again to Admiral Porter. Never would a plan be bolder. On March 29th, Grant asked Admiral Porter to run his gunboats past the Frowning Bluff batteries at Vicksburg. Porter responded without hesitation and agreed to run his gunboats and rendezvous with Grant. However, he warned Ulysses, quote, "I am ready to cooperate with you in the matter of landing troops on the other side, but you must recollect that when these gunboats once go below, we give up all hopes of ever getting them up again." In other words, ladies and gentlemen, it is a do or die situation. When the gunboats go south with the current, they're doing 10 knots. If they try to come back north the opposite way against the current, they're doing 2 knots. Now, that gives the Confederate gunners a whole lot more opportunity to get to shoot at the Union Navy. Grant had better be sure about what he's doing. On April 16th, a moonless night, 12 vessels started their run down the Mississippi River. Suddenly, Confederate sentries fired the buildings opposite Vicksburg and illuminated the river, and the ground roared. After 2.5 hours of firing, the Union fleet emerged below Vicksburg, and almost every vessel had been hit, but only one transport had been sunk. Grant's army met the Navy at Hard Times, Louisiana. If you look at the map, I don't want you to focus on the whole map right now. I want you to focus on the left side of the map with the blue arrow that's going straight down. And forget about the rest of the map. That is Grant's march down the side of Louisiana. The Navy, Vicksburg is up at the top center of the map. You can see a red circle around the city right there. Don't worry about that right now. Grant's army is going to take off marching from the top of the map, follow the blue line down the left side, and rendezvous with the Navy at Hard Times, further down below the city right there. The plan called for landing at Grand Gulf after the Navy had knocked the batteries out there. On April 29th, the Union Navy engaged Grand Gulf. Many sailors were ducking as they ran past the batteries that day, when large cannonballs were coming through here. The Navy failed to knock out the Confederate guns. Yeah, he didn't get any of that. Resilient, where are you going? So much for the Navy. The resilient Grant was undaunted. He simply looked for another landing site. When I go through this whole thing, ladies and gentlemen, keep your eye on the prize. I want you to notice, ladies and gentlemen, how much Grant changes his plans. Right? He is never wedded. He is always flexible. Learn. Learn from what Grant is doing here. This is how you fight a campaign out through here. Grant decided to land at a place called Bruinsburg. On April 30th, as a band aboard played on a transport patriotic tunes, Union soldiers landed on the eastern bank, and Grant had a foothold in Mississippi. He was still not out of danger yet, though. If the Confederates moved fast, they could still catch him before his 20,000 men could all land. Pemberton did not do this, though. He still did not think the main Union attack would come from the south. Pemberton right here. Pemberton, ladies and gentlemen, was a Yankee. He was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on August 10th, 1814. In 1837, he graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point, ranking 27th out of 50 cadets. Pemberton became a career military officer, receiving 2 brevets for gallantry in the Mexican War, and in 1848, he married a Southerner. Patty. Hey. Now you can boo again after this next sentence. The secession, it won't hurt my feelings. The secession of Virginia in 1861 forced Pemberton to choose between the warring factions. His wife's staunch loyalty to the South probably influenced Pemberton to resign from the U.S. Army and join the Confederacy. There's no love around here, man. It's friggin'... That's terrible. It proved a fateful decision. Y'all could have kept him. I'm sure. There you go, buddy. I always wanted to be that comedian that had the drink on stage. What's his name? Ron White. No, I want to be that. Get paid. On June 17th, I want you to notice something right here with him, ladies and gentlemen. I'm about to show you exactly in real time and in real life what the Peter Principle is. All right? On June 17th, 1861, Pemberton received a brigadier general's commission in the Confederate Army, and promotions rapidly followed. The fall of 61 found him in South Carolina overseeing the construction of coastal defenses. By January 62, the War Department had appointed him to the rank of Major General, followed in March by a formal assignment as the commander of the Department of South Carolina and Georgia. President Jefferson Davis reassigned Pemberton in October of 62 to command the Department of Mississippi and East Louisiana, which gave him the all-important task of defending Vicksburg and Port Hudson. The reason that he got sent to Mississippi, since you're all my friends, or y'all used to be, out here. You know, this program really started bad. It all started with Troy Harm. All right? The reason he gets transferred to Mississippi is he's in South Carolina. All right? He's in charge of Charleston, the cradle of secession. All right? Do you know why a South Carolinian wasn't president of the Confederacy? Because they're nuts. That's why. They're a bunch of hotheads. And then Jefferson Davis sends a Yankee down there? What do you think South Carolinians are thinking? You know? Are you booing South Carolina Pemberton or the fact that he got removed? I can't. So Jefferson Davis has to get him out of there. He sends him to Mississippi. He's got a problem again. Pemberton's a major general. Another guy by the name of Earl Van Dorn's a major general. Earl Van Dorn outranks Pemberton. Earl Van Dorn has fought the Battle of Pea Ridge and the Battle of Corinth, which is all like a debacle. Jefferson Davis needs to do something with him. So what do you do with John C. Pemberton in order to solve the problem? You promote him, right? You promote him up here. And that is how John C. Pemberton got to be a lieutenant general. I hope you noticed, ladies and gentlemen, he is a lieutenant general and has never been in a battle. No event in the resume of Pemberton's military career warranted this rapid promotion. To compound his woes, Pemberton had a domineering personality that tended to irritate subordinates. The rank and file distrusted him because of his northern birth, and these ingredients spelled disaster for the Confederacy. Now, Pemberton does not have corps. He has divisions. No corps at Vicksburg. 5 division commanders right here. On the top left, that is John S. Bowen from Missouri. Possibly, and I think I can say this with all probability, the finest combat commander in the Vicksburg campaign. His Missouri and Arkansas men were shock troops, hard-hitting boys. And those men from Missouri and Arkansas really knew how to fight. And he was a good leader. He molded them. The man in the middle, it may be familiar to you with the Shenandoah campaign, from early Shenandoah campaigns in '62. That's William W. Loring. Lost an arm in the Mexican War. The gentleman on the right, who probably none of you have ever heard of, is Carter L. Stevenson. He will end up defending Lookout Mountain after Vicksburg. The gentleman on the bottom left is John H. Forney. I've actually been to his grave. To the right of that is Martin L. Smith, who none of you have heard of, but all of you have heard of, and you don't even know it. Martin L. Smith will leave out of Vicksburg and will return to Virginia and become the chief engineer for Robert E. Lee in 1864. It will be Martin L. Smith, we think, that leads Longstreet's corps through the unfinished railroad cut in the wilderness into a position to attack Hancock. It is Martinell Smith that reportedly draws out the mule shoe in the darkness at Spotsylvania, and it is reportedly Martinell Smith that gives Robert E. Lee the idea for the inverted V at the North Anna River. And whenever that was, June, right? Something like that. Then he's transferred down to Georgia, where he fights with Joe Johnson and ends up commanding it at Mobile when the war is over. Interesting guy. Nothing's ever been written about him. Hint, hint. Now, if you look at this map, basic rehash, because we got to get into the siege. General Grant's going to land at the bottom. He's going to fight immediately John S. Bowen's men. Bowen's outnumbered. He's got about 5,000 men. Grant's got about 20,000. The terrain is like a jungle, and it still is. Most pristine battle in the entire U.S. is Port Gibson, Mississippi. It's nothing but a one-lane dirt road and deer camps. And the only house out there is from the Civil War. Pristine. You can see where the wagons cut down into the ridges. Bowen holds up Grant all day, but the numbers eventually tell, and they push Bowen back out of there. Grant now has his foothold. If you follow the blue arrow at the bottom and over to the right, Grant is swinging up toward the railroad. His objective is not Vicksburg. Well, his objective is Vicksburg, but it's not immediately the city. It's the railroad. If you can cut the railroad, then you can get the city. So he swings up to cut the railroad, and all of a sudden, where you see that next battle, the bottom, the right center, the Battle of Raymond, if you follow the arrow right there, this is the neat thing about General Grant. He fights, the Confederates attack him from behind, James McPherson's corps, and they end up fighting this battle, and Grant is able to flip it. He thinks to himself, oh, well, I'm headed in this direction toward the railroad. Uh-oh, Confederates attack me over here. There must be Confederates in Jackson. That's on the far right of the map right there. So Grant changes his plans on a dime, reverses the army, sends it over to Jackson, away from Pemberton's army, and he gets in between them. Folks, this is what they taught at West Point. Napoleon would have been smiling from heaven. This is how you defeat a superior army. You defeat them in detail. He goes to Jackson. He fights a small engagement there, pushes that Confederate army under Joe Johnson away from Pemberton, and then turns his army, the Union army, back toward Vicksburg, Mississippi. They end up, Pemberton's army and Grant's army end up colliding, if you're following the arrow, now toward Vicksburg along the railroad. Pemberton and Grant collide at a place called Champion Hill. And this is one of the largest engagements in the Western theater. It's about, it's probably about between 50 and 60,000 men slugging it out there. And there's not even a monument on the field today. It is an overwhelming victory for the Union. They drive the Confederate forces back, pushing Pemberton back toward Vicksburg. They fight one last engagement at the Battle of Big Black River on May 17th, and Pemberton falls back into the city of Vicksburg. As the Union Army approached Vicksburg, Mississippi, Grant and Sherman rode with the advance. Quote, this is from Sherman. In a few minutes, Sherman had the pleasure of looking down from the spot coveted so much by him the December before on the ground where his command had lain so helpless for offensive action. This is Grant writing. He turned to me, saying that up to this minute he had felt no positive assurance of success. This, however, he said, was one of the greatest campaigns in history, and I ought to make a report of it at once. Vicksburg was not yet captured, and there was no telling what might happen before it was taken, but whether captured or not, this was a complete and successful campaign. One of the most successful of the war. Now you have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that pulling up outside of Vicksburg in this area, that General U.S. Grant is on a roll. He's like a gambler. He's like a gambler on a crap table or a slot machine where everything's starting to get warm right here. He is like a boxer that is rolling. You're a gambler, sir? You seem to like that. Okay. All right, nothing wrong with gambling if that's what you like. Whatever. Somebody got to pay taxes. Oh, I forgot about the casino thing here. I probably shouldn't have said. If you think of it, I don't really endorse anything. In fact, my name is not Matt. My name is actually Frank, if you'd like to ring. Grant is like a boxer, ladies and gentlemen, and he has been pummeling his opponent. And he's thinking to himself, one more round and I might knock these boys out of here. I believe Grant wrote he would not make, meaning Pemberton, he would not make much effort to hold Vicksburg. But 2 days after the Big Black debacle, end of quote, but 2 days after the Big Black debacle, the Confederates had recovered. And Pemberton had approximately 30,000 men with roughly 10,000 of this force fresh. Why? Because at the Battle of Champion Hill, Pemberton had two masters to please. He had President Jefferson Davis telling him to hold the city. He had Confederate General Joseph Johnston tell him to evacuate and join forces. Pemberton tried to please two masters and ended up pleasing none. He took 3 divisions to fight Grant at Champion Hill and left 2 in the city. Thought I had till 2:30. Do I not have till 2:30? Okay, so what ends up happening is the Siege of Vicksburg in double quick time. You'll give me 15, won't you, Susan? For old time's sake, honey. Grant launches an assault on May 19th. His forces aren't up. He did a poor job of reconnoitering. He ends up attacking at the top of the map with Sherman's corps, and it ends up being a bloody debacle right there. To show you what men behind fortifications can do, on the May 19th assault, Grant will lose 942 men compared to the Confederates' 250. That is a 4-to-1 ratio of casualties. Now, as we get into Vicksburg, you ought to know what is causing these casualties. They are called, obviously, fortifications. If you look at this line right here, this man behind a fortification on the right can easily fire down into an advancing enemy. He would be behind mostly entrenchments, but where there are weak points in the line, they will fortify them with such places as redans. These redans would stick out in front of the rest of the line, forming a salient angle right there. A lunette, which has 2 faces and 2 flanks. A redoubt, which is much like a fort, except it's not enclosed all the way around on 4 sides, right through here. If you look at the map, that entire ring of red which you see around the city would have been about 8 miles. And there would have been 9 major Confederate fortifications dotting that 8-mile ring. Basically, Vicksburg is a series of ridges. Unions on one ridge, Confederates on the other, and there's a ravine in between. Sometimes there are ridges connecting the 2 sides, and that is where you put your forts, where they cross over. Unperturbed by the May 19th repulse, Grant decided to assault 3 days later. And by this time, his troops all along the front had closed within assaulting distance. Grant had his commanders synchronize their watches, and at 6 o'clock, a massive artillery bombardment lit up the front as every Union cannon was brought to bear. The Union Navy joined the chorus. 4 hours later, the guns fell silent. With a loud huzzah, thousands of Union troops surged across the valleys and swells toward the Confederate lines. On the lower part of the picture right here is McClernand's corps. And in a brief moment, the Union troops are going to seize the railroad redoubt, which is that point of red that juts out in front of the main Confederate line right there. Sergeant J.E. Griffith and 12 men are actually going to enter the railroad redoubt. These are pictures. They won't show up too well on these small TVs, but these are pictures of the railroad redoubt right here. These Iowans, anybody from Iowa? Oh, there you go. A token Iowan. This, ladies and gentlemen, for your viewing pleasure, is a piece of the Vicksburg cyclorama painting. That's pretty cool, isn't it? I don't like people telling me what to do. At the 2nd Texas Lunette, McClernand's men swarmed toward their objective, but they got pinned down also. The Confederates are going to end up opening up at a few hundred yards, and the Union column will start melting away. If you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, out here, the Union just cannot get any foothold, major foothold, inside the fortifications. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the side of the 2nd Texas Lunette, and where you see that little blue marker along the ground right there in the middle of the picture, some Illinois, the Chicago Mercantile Battery, is going to bring up a 6-pound cannon by hand, drag it to the fort, stick the muzzle through the embrasure, the hole in the fort, and fire it in there at point-blank range. You don't get this stuff at Gettysburg. That's crazy. Can you imagine what them Texans are like? Right in there. It's crazy. If you think about it, there's another picture of it right there. The Union will surge ahead, and 2 desperate assaults. But the casualties, the only thing that will end up happening is the casualties will continue to pile up. Body after body after body. In the end, ladies and gentlemen, Grant will call the assault off. And because of him calling that assault off over here, that means that the Union line will just be closer to the Confederates, but will have no major breakthroughs, so to speak. That's the Graveyard Road right there. It's not going to show up too well right there. There's a good picture. That's from the Confederate fort looking down the Graveyard Road. They actually had Union soldiers carry ladders called the Forlorn Hope in advance of the Union Army, the Union infantry right there. And they had no guns. They were just chewed to pieces. There's a picture from the Union side. Orion P. Howe, he's 14 years old and wins the Medal of Honor. Why? Because he ran back to try to get ammunition. Sherman will actually get him an appointment to the Naval Academy. Ready for it? He goes to the Naval Academy and he promptly flunks out. Well, you think drummer boys are well educated? Nothing to prep him for that. Except, of course, the Chesapeake Civil War Roundtable. Now, after the assault is over, Grant has suffered 3,199 casualties on May 22nd, with 502 killed. Confederate casualties are unknown, but we think they were around 500. Grant settled down for a 47-day siege. A siege, ladies and gentlemen, to say the least, is slow. How many of you have ever seen like Kingdom of Heaven or Last of the Mohicans? You know, where they're digging the approach trenches toward the area. That is the material you would need in order to dig from behind, fascines and gabions and so forth. The Union would actually start 13 of these approaches toward the Confederate line. The only one which I will focus upon will be Logan's. Now watch the TV screen. This is how an approach goes. You don't dig an approach straight ahead because you could get shot. You dig it at an angle. And that is how you will approach it. When the Confederates, when the Union, I should say, got to Fort Hill, as they called it, the 3rd Louisiana Redan, they can't go over it. They can't go around it. So what do they end up doing? They go under it. That's right. And they actually had some coal miners that they were able to do that with. Here's a picture of the shanties where the approach started. You won't be able to see that, but that's kind of like Fresnito, you know. There's the modern picture up top and the old picture down on the bottom. Here's a better picture of it. When they eventually get to the 3rd Louisiana Redan, they decide to dig underneath it. This is Andrew J. Hickenlooper and, Henry C. Foster. And he and his sharpshooters, see what happens when I get in a hurry? Henry C. Foster will be in charge of the sharpshooters who keep the Confederates' heads down while they're digging a tunnel underneath there. He will also construct a tower called Coonskin's Foster because he wore a coonskin cap upon his head. I'm not going to look at you over there. That is Coonskin's Foster's tower right there. How would you like to be getting shot at from that tower? Do I have time for one story? One story? Who wants one story? Okay. Okay, who wants them to leave me alone? Anybody got any rope? Reckon, we'll show you. My God, you don't do this to me. General Grant will actually climb up in Coonskin Foster's tower, and he'll get up to the top. Well, the soldiers had kind of an informal truce where they decided they wouldn't shoot at each other. And so they had, with this informal truce, the Confederates didn't know who General Grant was. So General Grant gets up there and he's looking around over into the Confederate lines, and this Confederate soldier, one of the great what-ifs of the Civil War, this Confederate soldier sees this officer up there, and he's instead of shooting, he starts cursing him, telling him to get his blankety-blank fool head down before he blankety-blanked his blank. You know? A Confederate officer hears the soldier cursing and comes out front and looks and sees that there's a Union officer over there, and then instead of telling the soldier to shoot, he reprimands the Confederate soldier for cursing a fellow officer. It's a freaking true story if I ever told one. Right there. Yeah. This is the line of the approach. The 3rd Louisiana Redan's on the other side right there. That's the parallel. This is, you'll see why. On the bottom picture where you see the two cannons right there, the 3rd Louisiana Redan would have had walls about the size of this tent. And you're about to find out why the walls are no longer there. Because on June 25th, they're going to pack 2,200 pounds of gunpowder under this fort right here, and they're going to blow it sky high. Right up. Y'all think Petersburg gets all the attention just because, what was that girl's name from Cold Mountain? Kim Basinger, what was her name? Well, whatever, it's whatever. Same thing. Maybe I'm dating myself. But it blows it sky high. The Yankees are going to pile in there. But they're not going to get anywhere. And for 24 hours, they're going to fight it out, resulting in 34 killed for the Union, 209 wounded, while the Confederates suffered 21 killed and 73 wounded. On July 1st, Union forces demolished the remaining left half of the Redan with an 1,800-pound charge. On this occasion, though, when they blew it up one more time with 1,800 pounds, the Confederates had taken their soldiers out of the fort, and instead they had put 6 slaves in there under the command of a white officer. It killed all of them, except for one, a slave named Abraham, who was blown sky high and landed in the Union lines. and he didn't have a scratch on him. Union soldiers picked him up, dusted him off, and got him calmed down finally. And then they asked him, you know, what's your name, where are you from, all that stuff. And he said they finally, it spread on the grapevine telegraph like wildfire, this guy's story. So enterprising Union soldiers put him in a tent and charged 25 cents to see America's first astronaut. Am I telling you? See? Who's following me anyway? Oh, Ed's following me. I wonder why I just got this text, why Ed's coming. Why don't you shut up? I was like that's not nice. That's cool, Ed. I'm a warm-up for Ed, huh? That's cool. Ed doesn't know anything about Vicksburg. Arr. Right there. Or how about Patton? I could go up to Ed. I could be like, I read your book. Right there. That's very cool. So, this is pretty cool. I got to wrap this up, but this is pretty cool. On July 1st, when they blow up the second half of that Redan right there, the Union soldiers the Union Army did not have any mortars. They actually took oak trees and cut the center sections out of them, bored them out to 6 and 12-pound balls, and brought them up within 150 yards of the 3rd Louisiana Redan and started lobbing shells into the Confederate fort. You see it right there. There's one of them. I'm not talking about putting pounds of powder. Do not go home and try this, all right? I'm not talking about putting pounds of powder. I'm talking about putting 2 or 3 ounces of powder to get the ball barely over into the Confederate fort. The Confederates wrote that the majority of their casualties came in the last 2 days of the siege from these mortars right here, at least in the 3rd Louisiana Redan. The Navy also, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be lobbing in by big mortars, 13-inch mortars, 225-pound balls into the city. All right? Which is no joke. Mostly they would be falling on the innocent women and children. Which you can form a line and apologize after this program is over. They would actually fire that 225-pound shell 2.5 miles using 25 pounds of powder. Yeah. The reason more civilians, only a handful, were killed is because they lived in caves right here. Now, in conclusion, I've got to cut through this right here because I can't keep going. We got to get Ed on here. That's what you came out to see. I was wondering why all these people were gathering around the tent. I was like, man, there's a lot of people interested in Vicksburg around here. I was like, maybe I'm more popular than I thought. But then it dawned on me, Ed's here. And they're really not here to see me. It's like the opening act, you know, for a rock star or something. So, if you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, on July 4th, on July 3rd, 1863, after 47 days of siege, the Confederates are going to fly the white flag from the entrenchments. They had literally been on half rations from the beginning, which had been halved again, which had been halved again. They had been living on field peas. They had been living on Mississippi River water, which had introduced a lot of dysentery. I can tell you from working at Vicksburg and having worn wool uniforms 5 days a week that it is just monstrosity heat. This is nothing compared to what Mississippi summer can put on you. The Confederate soldiers were just too weak. Pemberton did not want to surrender, but he took a council of war. His officers voted, and they all said their men cannot undergo the hardship of a march if they broke through. So he goes out to negotiate with Grant on July 3rd, and the two can't come to an agreement. Grant tells him, I've got no terms to offer. Pemberton says, you got no terms, then we might as well go to fighting again. And I'll tell you something, buddy, you're going to bury a lot more of your men before you get into Vicksburg. I guarantee it. So they broke them apart. The junior officers got together, and Grant decided to send in terms that evening. On the morning of July 4th, Pemberton will will accept the terms of Grant, which is to have his army paroled. They will not go to prison. They will be paroled. 29,500 Confederates will lay down their arms, and more importantly, an entire Confederate army is taken off the board. They surrendered, ladies and gentlemen, 172 pieces of artillery, 93 field pieces, 69 siege guns, 38,000 projectiles, and 58,000 pounds of black powder, 4,800 artillery cartridges, 50,000 small arms, mostly infills, along with 600,000 rounds of ammunition and 350,000 percussion caps. Right there. Union soldiers entered a landscape that was dotted by shell holes and caves. If you couple, ladies and gentlemen, the Confederate loss of 27,000 here at the Siege of at Gettysburg, and you couple 30,000 men being surrendered at Vicksburg, I hope you see the big picture from this talk. It is a 1-2 punch, ladies and gentlemen, that the Confederacy has a hard time overcoming. They just can't afford to sustain these losses right here. As far as the campaign from the Union side, with the fall of Vicksburg, the Mississippi River is opened. And the Mississippi River being in entire Union possession allows them to split the Confederacy in two, with Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, and Texas being cut off from the eastern half of the Confederacy. On another note, Vicksburg campaign makes General U.S. Grant. And as Abraham Lincoln said, the father of waters again goes unvexed to the sea. Thank you all very much.